Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. I'm Jose Palomino, your host, and our guest today is Barrett Thompson with Zilliant Corporation. And Zilliant focuses on pricing technology. And this is something you have to listen to because the principles we're going to talk about apply to any size company. And it's about pricing smartly to win more and better business. Listen carefully as Barrett joins our show. Well, welcome, Barrett, to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
Thank you, Jose. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Barrett, we always like to provide context right from our guests' lips for our audience. So, who do you serve and what do you do for them primarily? And I'm sure there's a lot of things you might do, but the main focus.
Absolutely. So I'm leading the business solutions consulting team at Zilliant. And Zilliant powers intelligent commerce for B2B companies. And that means we help them achieve their pricing and sales objectives by aligning strategy to execution. Now, high level, let me bring it down just a little bit more concrete. We're giving specific guidance, insights, and actions to frontline commercial teams so that they can make better pricing and sales decisions. And when you do that, that translates directly to top and bottom line for the business.
So what kind of situations, Barry? Because I'm hearing that and I'm saying, okay, the whole world's going to like AI, and eventually everybody will just be. And it's been a couple of movies on this. Everybody's just plugged into the matrix, and and the computers run everything. But it's still a human endeavor, the act of selling, relationship development, and so on. So, what kind of challenges does a company typically present where they say, "Gee, I wish somebody had something that," and that answer might be a platform like yours?
Yes, you're right. There's no replacing the human in the customer relationship. So the idea is not to do that, but it's to recognize that humans need help making decisions when the right decision depends on knowing something like what's happened over the last 3 years across the entirety of my business. If I have 200 frontline sellers, each of those sellers might know 0.5% of the transactions and orders we did last year. That's a really tiny window. But if we take an algorithm and ask it to look across what's happened in the entirety of our business over the last 2 years, look at all of the customers and all the products we sell, we're going to get a much richer understanding of what are the factors that are really influencing price in the market. How much does each of those factors really count in the final analysis? And I find this interesting, Jose, when we go in to discuss this with B2B businesses, the sales team generally has a pretty good understanding of factors that matter somewhat. They'll be able to list off 3 or 4 things. Well, if it's a really large customer, I'm going to give them a different price than if it's a customer who only occasionally buys from me. Or they might know regional price difference. Or they might know that this is my premium product line, have a lot of IP in that product, and I get biggest margins, but over here it's commoditized. So their instincts are correct, but they don't have any way to calibrate how much should these things matter? How should I then stack them up? And it's so easy to see this. I love to do this experiment. You get 3 or 4 of the top sellers in the business, or anyone who has a role thinking about price, and you get them in a room and you put up a picture of one of their common items, something that they sell every day, high velocity item. And you ask them, all right, I'm going to give you 90 seconds. You write down what you think the right price is for this product in the market. What's the fair price for this? Don't share your answers with anyone just yet. And they write those answers down. And then you say, now let's go to the whiteboard and capture everyone's answer. You're going to see several different values there. $4 a unit, 3.25, $2.85. These are all very successful people. They all sell all the time. They price all the time, but they come up with different values. What does that mean? Does it mean that they're all wrong and nobody knows, only the software knows? It doesn't mean that. It means they're all thinking about different circumstances. They're thinking about a different situation. And so they're onto something pretty powerful. The price is going to vary according to the situation or the circumstance into which you're selling. What is the order quantity? What else is on the order? Maybe it's a product mix. Who's the competitor? Am I already the incumbent? Do I have a relationship with them? What's the region? All of these factors matter, but how much they matter, everyone has a different idea. And no one's bothered to write it down. That matters 10%. That matters 5%. But if we study the data, the algorithms can tell us how much it matters. And then we're getting accurate and consistent pricing flowing out, where we used to have sort of semi-educated guesswork. And I don't mean to disparage it too much, but it is sort of guesswork in a way. but we can solidify that with sort of some hard science and back it up with numbers that'll make sense when the rep sees it, because they'll go, of course, because you're considering this and this and this, just like I would have, but with a level of accuracy that I wasn't able to get to.
Right. And in the experiment you gave with that group, for example, that, you know, I'm sure you've done this many times, you know, as you said, they all had different predicate information in their heads as to what were the assumptions, right? So like you can create any models, all the assumptions are agreed to, and
that's right.
And that's usually how you drive differences in the model. Also, the real distinction between a B2B situation and, you know, retail. Retail's doing this all the time, and they do it in large volume, large data sets. It's a lot trickier to do it with a B2B sales rep that may only have turnover of like 4 successful contracts a quarter because they're selling a big ticket item. So you just don't have the volume and velocity of data that you're going to capture intuitively. Sales manager's not going to track all of that.
Yeah.
So how do companies lacking an algorithm, let's say they don't have that kind of sophistication that you're describing, a platform like Zilliant, how have they been trying to solve this right now? Because they're trying to find optimal price. They don't want to give up margin if they don't have to, and they want to sell more. And they always ask that question, like, what should we price it at? We want to win the deal. How are they doing it now? Is it all just guesswork? Are they doing this on spreadsheets? You know, what are people doing in the real world?
I think it's a great question in 2 ways I think about that. Let me address the second piece first, the mechanics. What are the tools and systems by which they execute their ambition or their vision? The number one pricing tool in the world, unfortunately, is Excel. It's not purpose built, and that's its weakness, right? It's wide open. Anybody can do anything. I can cut and paste the formula and make an error. I can put 800 columns in that worksheet if I want to. And then once I have, I'm regretting that I went down that road, but now I'm stuck with it. I'm trying to do massive pivot tables. So Excel and email is unfortunately the state of the art for many B2B companies in terms of their tech set. And that's a huge hindrance and limitation. We could get into some of those details and may here in a moment. But on top of that mechanical platform, then, out of necessity, the approaches and the paradigms you're using, because they don't have a way to digest 3 years of data, and they don't have the data science to figure out the factors that matter, I see them defaulting to sort of, I call blunt instrument, you know, ways of doing it. It might be a simple cost plus approach. They might say, my average margins are 25, get an average margin 25 gross margin. So maybe one way to translate that is, I want to make sure I don't get much lower than 25 anywhere in the business, or I use that as a rule of thumb. I've seen other anchor points, which are common, but just as ineffective, quite frankly, the idea of a last price paid. When you mentioned a rep who says, you know, I'm trying to, maybe I only do 3 or 4 contracts during the year and I can't keep it all in my mind, or I know certain things matter, but I don't know how much they matter or how to combine them and add them to figure out the ultimate discount. So here's a quickie shortcut. Well, what did I use on the last quote? What price did I give last time when I got a win? And, you know, why? Because the win felt good and I want to get a win again. Sure. So I'm going to give that same price. And conversely, hey, the last time I tried for $4.75, it turned out to be a loss. So maybe I'm going to run away from that price. Well, it's situational. $4.75 could have been way too high in one case, but you could actually undershoot and leave 100 basis points on the table when you go to the next situation. So I watch businesses use cost plus, pretty common. Something like a last price paid. There's a lot of averaging going on. What's the average price I get for this unit?
So like portfolio pricing. What
portfolio,
do I get at, right? The line of business, right?
Exactly. Or we might say, well, think about one of my top SKUs and what's the average price I get for the SKU? And is the average price of that SKU managing to go up over time? You know, at least enough to cover some material cost inflation. Maybe that's the bar I set for myself and I managed to hit it on some high velocity SKUs. But just because you're taking the average up doesn't mean that you're doing the right thing. That average is composed of a range of prices you received in the market. Is that range correct? Is the width of that range correct? Did I give the high price to the customer who really needed the low, and the low to the guy who would have sustained the high? Because all those customers value the product differently. When you mentioned the B2C versus B2B differences, yeah, those are significant. One of them I would say is that in B2B, the nature of that relationship, buyer-seller, and what happens when you put a wrong price into the market can be a lot more damaging and what happens when you price a bar of soap or a box of cereal, incorrectly for a week. You can correct that by just repricing it tomorrow. And when somebody goes down the shopping aisle, they'll grab the product. But if you take a customer who's been your customer for 5 years and you go to them with a peanut butter spread, 15% price increase across the board because you just got hit with steel increase or tariff of the same, right, you arbitrarily do that, you may damage that relationship such that when you correct the price, they're like, too late. I've switched over to another supplier. I just got myself set up on their EDI. And so I have a switching cost to come back to you, and I'm sort of angry. So I'm not coming back. Not anytime soon.
Not anytime soon. That's for sure.
Not anytime soon. So you have to be thoughtful and you have to manage those relationships over time. Another idea here that I would caution businesses against, as much as I'm a strong advocate for getting the full and fair price for everything you sell, what if you have someone under contract and today they're way under what the market price should be, what the fair price is? And to jump them there all at once would mean a 20% price move.
Right.
You're just not going to get it. You're cutting off your nose to spite your face. The better strategy there is to lay out how you're going to increase them over time. Maybe you're going to take 3 steps of price increase over the next 18 months in order to bring them into alignment. It's the smart way to go about getting those prices aligned.
Otherwise, it's a shock to the system.
It is.
And to their conscience. And as you said, there is the human factors where they feel like you cheated them.
Right.
Essentially, even though you can have your sob story. Look, steel went up. We got hit with these tariffs. We have to recover it. We have to stay in business.
Yeah.
And some of the very large buyers, the very large corporate buyers, really don't care all that much about your sad story. They're saying, well, that's how you have to manage your business and so on. So you shock the system. And I love what you said, Barrett. Normally, you have the advantage of switching costs working in your favor if you're the incumbent.
Yes.
But once they've made the transition, which, by the way, and I'm sure you run into this all the time, they may not have told you they've switched until we're not buying from you anymore, and it's already too late. They've already moved on. And now the switching costs work against you.
They do.
And so like your world just got rocked and you didn't know why. And that's just an interesting dynamic that you've described.
It is. And, I want to pick up on that, Jose. I mentioned that Zilliant helps with pricing and sales performance. One of the things we do on the sort of the sales performance side is we use algorithms and data to detect when the customer is exhibiting behavior that suggests they're going to fully defect in the next 6 to 12 months. Because it doesn't happen all at once, right? They step out on a category. They give one category to a new supplier and they give them a try and they like it.
Don't worry about it. We just need to, our purchasing says we need to have some variety in our suppliers.
Yeah, we need to dual source this critical item, right? So they do that a little bit. But you know what? If I'm a sales rep who's looking at the aggregated spend for my customer, just the total revenue figure, quarter on quarter, let's say, I'm looking at it every quarter and it's in the aggregate. They could have dropped me on one product line, but actually made up for most of it on another product line. So when I say, okay, well, their revenue's, fluctuating by 2%, nothing to worry about. You should be worried if you were doing a category level scan and you said, wait a minute, I went from 10,000 a month to 0 a month in one of my categories. And that's not a good sign. So we have an algorithm that looks for that and detects that. And then it starts warning the sales rep months in advance. Hey, you need to call and ask what's happening in this category because it's an early indicator. And to your point, if I can get ahead of that just by broaching the topic with my customer, I can keep them in the boat. I can say, what's the issue? Is it a product quality? Am I not delivering on time? Do you have a billing accuracy question? Is someone poaching me on price? Do I need to be a little more mindful right here? I'd rather do that and keep that business than have them begin to step out. And then by the time I realize, oh, the revenue's down 40% quarter on quarter, I call up and they say, yeah, and next quarter it'll be 0 because I've switched over and now the switching costs are against. So there's something powerful here about getting ahead and getting informed by using data and really letting science algorithms do all the tedious work of combing through the data to find the interesting stuff. And that's really the worldview for what these modern tools can do.
Wow. So now let's say somebody listening here says, well, that sounds great, but I got 3 sales reps and myself, I'm the owner operator. Maybe it's a $25 million OEM or something like that, something relatively small. They serve aerospace or some very dedicated industry. Do these principles apply even in that small setting as well?
I believe that they mostly do. And the reason I say this is because the question we have to ask is, how complicated is it for you to make the pricing decisions that you make? It's a decision complexity question. How many pricing decisions do you make? How variable might they be? And how many factors are going to play in? Even a distributor in the $100 million range could have 5,000 customers that they serve.
Sure.
And they could have 10,000 products in inventory. Think about HVAC parts or auto parts distribution, right? So the combinations are quite large. There are some businesses, however, some B2Bs that are so heavily concentrated. If you are making a part, an OEM part, and you're only selling it to 3 customers, and they represent 100% of your revenue is 3 customers. My guess is those are golf course deals, and your CEO is talking, one-on-one with all of those. And you know what? I'm not going to have enough data with 3 customers to give you comps. The algorithms can't do their peer grouping and their comparative analysis, which is kind of essentially how they work, right? They look for similarities and then you want to exploit the similarities and the patterns. But if I've only got 3 customers that you've sold to, you've given them each slightly different prices, handshake deals on the golf course. Two things. There might not be enough data there to draw any conclusions because I only have 3 examples of how you price that SKU in the market. And the other thing I would say is each of those deals is so risky that you're going to put a ton of attention into it. And if you're able to put a ton of attention into it, you're probably going to do a good job. Here's the thing that I think about. If I'm a rep that has 100 accounts in my portfolio, I probably know the top 5, 6, 10 like the back of my hand. Mm-hmm. And it could be that I've already serviced them so well, know their needs so well. I know if they sneeze, right? So if they don't buy one of those core products, maybe I already know it and the algorithm's not telling me anything new, or the pricing algorithm is not helping me calibrate those 10 people because I already invest a ton of time and I do the homework. What about the other 90 in your portfolio that you don't have a chance to do that on? They're too small for you to take a long weekend and go trolling through the order data to see if something looks amiss or see if there's a price you might move up or down. What about the other 90? That's where the algorithm may really add a ton of value to you as a seller. It allows you to treat every one of your customers like your best customer in terms of how well you know them.
Well, let me just pause you for a second there, Barrett, because I love that phrase. That turn of phrase is fantastic. It allows you to treat even your smallest customer as if they were your best customer. Because the reality is a lot of sales professionals will say, yeah, I know I should go down my list. No one would argue that. Maybe not all the way down to, they're thinking from like 99, but they want to go the next 10 or next 20.
Yeah.
But they're so busy with the top 5 that they won't. And those golf course deals, by the way, are farther and fewer between. And people know from just looking at things from a valuation point of view, that's dangerous customer concentration. So anyone listening, if that's you, shouldn't be you. You got to diversify. But to your point, having the technology that allows you to have visibility at the level of nuanced detail, that's amazing. And that's really very powerful. So can you describe maybe a situation, and obviously I'm not asking you to name names, but a company that maybe wasn't doing that, you were able to successfully implement your platform for them, and like a before and after? I'd be just curious, like an industry or a type of example.
Yes, I've got one that I was close to for many years here at Zilliant, and this is a manufacturer that comes out of the electrical product space. And I'm going to tell their pricing story for a moment. When we met them, they said, we are doing a large volume of project-specific quotes. They're contractors that come to us, bill of materials, we need to quote it. And we asked them, well, are you pricing any of this using like high leveraged price types? Like, do you have a predefined discount matrix for certain regions of the country, or certain categories get 10 off and 20 off? And they said, well, we do, but the way we've chosen to maintain those prices are unreasonably high in the market. And we get it. Nobody's going to pay those prices. Those just act as a reference price for us. So they'd because those prices were unrealistic, which is an issue all in itself, they created this tidal wave of contractors that were forced to come and ask for a special price exception on every deal, because that was every project. That was the only way to get a price that was going to be market aligned. Tens of thousands of projects per month that they're trying to handle. And what they didn't have was a way to figure out what the differentiated price should be on each of these projects.
Mm.
These could be $5,000 projects. They could be $500,000 projects. So we help them go through the data analysis and the science work to figure out what are the factors that really matter. Does the project size matter? Product mix? The type of industry or application into which the product is being sold? Turns out that all of these did have a statistically significant impact on the price. So we identified those, we calibrated those, and we used them to generate proactive price guidance. So imagine this. Now, Jose, this is like opposite of how most businesses do. They wait for a opportunity to hit their door and they say, oh, I need to come up with a price for that. Because at that moment, they know who is the customer, what is the product, what is the job size. They know all these things at the last moment. So then they go get busy trying to figure out what the price would be. Think of that as a just-in-time way to calculate price. The algorithm, and this is what we did for this manufacturer, it calculates all possible prices for every combination that you could ever theoretically run into. Every job size, every region, every product category, every mix that you could see. All combinations are pre-calculated because the computer does that in a flash, doesn't care. Does all of that in a flash. And then when a deal hits the door, you don't have to calculate anything. You just go look it up. What is the optimal price that we already calculated for this theoretical circumstance, which is now actually before us? So you know what that did for them? It took their quote turnaround time from 4.5 days to like under minutes.
Right. Near real time for all
yeah,
the purposes.
Near real time. And they asked us, they said, you know what, we have this workflow approval in our CPQ tool. How could we tie that price guidance that you're giving to the workflow? We said, tell you what, if the sales rep is asking for a price that is within a tolerance of the guidance that we're giving, we'll auto approve them in the system automatically. And by the way, if they say, well, hey, I can't quite reach the target price that you're giving me, here's another price that the customer asked for, we can evaluate that with the software and give an intelligent counteroffer. We took 60% of that volume of the thousands, tens of thousands of quotes per month, and the frontline sales rep is getting their answer in a few seconds, either as the initial price guidance or as the intelligent counteroffer, and they're off and running. And you talk about a difference maker in terms of their win rates. So that was huge. Not only was their win rate up because they were responding quickly, they weren't losing because they were the last guy to the party with a price quote, but now they also raised their margins significantly because they were able to tailor that price and dial in that price so that they could get the highest profitability on the project, but without putting the project at risk. And so that was a game changer for them.
Well, so
both in terms of profitability and top line.
You improve the value proposition competitively in the marketplace, radically improved and probably saved them a ton of money operationally. You had happier sales reps, which shows up, and sales rep shows up with a smile. The last thing you want is to get a request to sales rep and oh, I'm going to be working on this all night tonight to try to get this pricing done. That you can't help but transmit some of that to the customer. It comes across on the phone, comes across on Zoom. It's just not a positive attitude, as opposed to no problem, we'll get this, quoted for you. And then the pricing is actually the pricing that customer wants to see. So you're going to win more often, right? Winning better business more often. I love that story, Barrett. That's a fantastic leverage point. And I love leverage, anything that can really show, because it's multifaceted. It's not just we get you better pricing. It had, I'm sure, a lot of long-lasting effects on that business.
Yes. To your point about prices that the customers like, I have heard our customers tell us one of the dynamics in their industry is, I'll go back to an auto parts supplier. They say when there's a repair shop at the end of the street and they need to get a remanufactured water pump for a certain vehicle that they have in the bay, time is money. They want to get that vehicle turned so they can get the next car in the bay. They have the 3 auto parts providers near them on speed dial. The question is, who are they going to call first? And they'll push the first speed dial. And the first question they ask is, do you have the part in stock? Can you get it to me today? And if I say yes, then they're going to ask me one more question. What's the price? And all I have to give them is a price that doesn't lose the deal, right? If I'm reasonable, then it's mine. They're not going to shop it. They're not going to take it out to anybody else. So just get a price that's reasonable and I won't lose the deal. And so the customer expects that they've got a they've got to pay for the product, and they ought to pay a fair price for the product. So just give them a price that's reasonable. You often don't have to explain and defend it. After all, we've calibrated the algorithms to understand what that item is worth to that buyer. And so when you put a price that matches their perceived worth, it just makes sense to them. They want to act on it. So there really is a phenomenon here where you give a price that doesn't draw an argument. That's great for all sorts of things. It gets the deal done. It keeps the relationship tight. It makes you the preferred supplier, the one who's easy to do business with. So that's why you stay number one on the speed dial. There's a lot of virtue there. And you can do that while picking up 10 basis points, 20 basis points, 100 basis points here and there. It will be asymmetric. You're not going to get the same lift everywhere. You don't need to. That's one of the powers of the algorithm. It's not going to do that peanut butter thing and just try to get a 2% price increase across the board.
But you don't
it may actually take price down on one item and take price up on 3 other items, because that's the way to match the value that this particular customer or this particular circumstance places on your item.
And that makes it for a stickier customer, reduces cost of sale. I mean, just a lot of virtuous things come out of it. And I love this, just the note, the turn of a phrase, give them a price that doesn't prompt an argument, right? And because they're a knowledgeable buyer, they kind of have an idea what a water pump should cost, more or less, right? It may be different models, different price. So just don't blow them out of the water. And as you said, they have other considerations, speed being number one. Do you have it available and so on? Great example, Barrett. Tremendous amount of great principles just shared in this time together. So I'm so grateful for you being on the show today, Barrett. Thank you so much for that. And I also know you have an event coming up soon. If you could just tell us a little bit about that event and how people can find out about it.
We do. We have an event called Getting to Know Zilliant. And that's something that if you're not familiar with these pricing technologies and other intelligent technologies to help sales and pricing, it's a great time to learn about them, to learn about the problems that they solve and hear examples of people who've done that, and a little bit more about the technology set itself. We're holding that on November 16th. And if you will visit zilliant.com/events, you'll be able to see all about that Getting to Know Zilliant event and register for it.
Fantastic. And I also know you made available for our listeners a report from IDC, which is a leading market research firm in technology. We're going to have that link on our page, but what is the report about, just so our listeners can be looking for it?
IDC has taken a look at all of the leading vendors in this space of price optimization and sales enablement. What's unique about their report, and I think your listeners will value this, is IDC didn't just interview the vendors, tell me who you are. They went to the customers of the vendors and they said, what is it like to work with these people? What are the gains that you've experienced? What are the benefits that you have from using this solution? And they wrote their report from that perspective, from the perspective of businesses just like your listeners.
Okay, and we'll make that available to our listeners for free on our page for this podcast. Barrett Thompson, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here at the Revenue Throughput Podcast. Really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Jose.